This is always a difficult thing for me to do, is break down. I've been doing this for 40 years, and to break down 40 years to 40 minutes is always a challenge. But I will try. One of the ways that I do that is try to be as current as possible. So not focus on the first 39 years, but focus on the last year. I want to point something out that in my orientation, and you'll see in my presentation that I have very bizarre views of the world, and I'm going to show you the first one. This mobile, the term mobile. This is going to be mainly about wireless, okay? I'm mainly going to talk about, because that's the current thing, right? Of all the things that we have, wires has been around for a long time, so it's going to be wireless. But I want to make a good distinction between the difference between what mobile is. You can be mobile and not wireless. Does that make sense? If I go from my office desk to my home desk, I'm mobile. I have now moved my workspace from one to the other, but I'm not wireless. And I think that's an important concept we need to understand, is we're trying to solve problems. And so the problem is not wireless. The problem is mobility. The problem is delivering solutions to people while they're mobile. The fact that wireless is a choice of that is what's important. Okay? So first slide, I already went 2 or 3 minutes. A lot of the stuff I'm pulling out of this for you comes out of this document. It's an IFMA document. You can get it online if you go onto the IFMA source. And so in this 40-minute presentation, I'm going to skip over a lot of the heavy technical stuff, obviously. But a lot of it is in here. What do you see wrong with this slide? 2005, right? Some technology has not changed since 2005. But most of the stuff you care about is all changed. So I'm going to try to update it from this. But it's a good source, and IFMA does a great job in providing you with a lot of good education, and I just want to make sure that you understand that. All right. The big thing nowadays is 4G. You've probably heard about it. It's around, so I'm going to try to explain 4G. One of the ways that I'm going to explain it, I'm going to show you some commercials that you're probably familiar with.
LTE has the fastest speeds. So let's talk about coverage. Based on this chart, who would you choose?
Wow.
Just take a minute.
Verizon, hands down.
I'm going to show you guys another chart.
Pretty obvious.
I don't think color matters.
Pretty obvious. What's pretty obvious about it?
Verizon has the coverage.
Verizon.
We're going to go to another chart.
It doesn't really matter how you present
I
it.
tell you what,
It doesn't matter how you present it. Verizon. More 4G LTE coverage than all other networks combined.
Let me see. Are you kidding me? Mr. Woodson?
Hello. Caleb, I got someone I want you to meet.
Hello, AT&T, the nation's largest 4G network, covering 3,000 more 4G cities and towns than Verizon. Rethink possible.
You notice they all say they're the largest 4G network. So if you've got to buy this stuff, what do you do? I mean, how do you make the decision? Verizon, and here's the subtle part. This is marketing people, technology people are great. So if you notice that the minutia, Verizon says they're the largest LTE network. All right, so a lot of people call 4G, so Verizon is a specific technology called LTE. AT&T just says they're 3,000 more than Verizon. Well, if Verizon says they're the largest and they're more than Verizon, then They got to be largest. And of course, T-Mobile says they're the largest 4G network because they use a different technology than LTE. Right? So you almost have to be an engineer to pay attention to this, to make decisions based on ads. The answer to this, don't make decisions based on ads. Right? All right, what are we going to talk about? As I said, we're going to talk about wireless technologies. We're going to talk about wireless applications. I'm an applications guy. Technology is important, but it's what you do with the technology that matters. I'm going to also talk about some decision criteria and performance measures. I believe, I live by a thing, you cannot expect what you do not inspect. Has anybody heard that before? Right? You cannot expect what you do not inspect. My kids hated that because you know what I inspected with my kids. So I'm going to talk about what you should be inspecting, measuring performance. And then finally, I'll talk a little about future-proofing wireless applications. Make sense? By the way, I'm interrupt-driven, meaning if you have questions, stop me along the way, because you'll forget about it by the end. And then that way I want to make sure that I answer questions for you. This is an education session for you, so if you don't ask the question, you may not learn as much. So please stop me. My learning objectives that I want to do, understand some current wireless technology terms like the term LTE, and I'm going to talk about HSPA, which is what T-Mobile uses and AT&T, just so you know some of the terms. Gain awareness in some of those technologies. Again, decision criteria. I'm all about the decision criteria. Why do you do this if you're not going to make better decisions? And then measurable performance plan. Okay? All right. This is the way I approach pretty much everything, not just this. Our goal is to make better decisions. When I got up this morning, the first decision I had to make, what time to get up in order to be here on time. What am I going to wear? What am I going to drive? How am I going to get here? We make a series of decisions all the time. That's what we do. That's what you're probably paid to do, right? Make decisions, okay? Better decisions come from better information. In order to make that decision, I need to know, well, what's the weather going to be like today? Right? If it was snowing, I need to make a different decision in terms of when to drive here than if it's not snowing. Here's the key to what I do. All that's fine. I believe this. I believe it's communication that gets you that information. You could have the best information in the world, but if you can't communicate it to the people who need that information, it's useless. So that's what I'm all about. I'm all about helping people communicate so they can get better information. You probably all know this already, but humans are wired to connect. Of all the animals in the world, I saw a Secretariat the other day, and I don't know if anybody's seen the movie, but John Malkovich marvels that Seabiscuit stands up immediately and how right at birth, Seabiscuit is able to just function. Okay? Humans aren't like that. We need to connect. We need the interactions. We raise our kids 4, 5, 6 years old before they're really able to function at all. We are wired to connect. We need to connect. We're also mobile, right? We also are very mobile. We're wired to connect and we're mobile. Therefore, staying connected while you're mobile is absolutely critical. And it is an important need for people. Make sense? All right. This slide here I can spend obviously my whole career on this slide, but there's a couple of terms I want you to be aware of. Packet networks and the cloud. Those are two very popular terms. The internet is a packet network. And I'm going to explain the packet network in a second. But here's examples of some of architectures of the internet. A key thing about the internet, about packet networks, all endpoints, all these little endpoints are virtually equal. Architecturally, they're virtually equal. People are here, there's some people on Wi-Fi right now, and you all have your BlackBerries and your iPhones. All those endpoints to the network are all equal. And that's an important architectural reality. Not anything that you're going to make a decision with now, but I just wanted to point that out to you. The more important one is the next bullet. Intelligence is divided between the device and the cloud. So if I look at a device like this, we call this a client. There exists a thing called a server. And Microsoft Exchange Server we're all familiar with. There exists in this cloud a server. So you have the clients talking to the server. What we've been able to do is we call it thin client. We make the client really small. It's a thin client. We make it real small because if it's small, it's efficient, it's inexpensive, it's less prone to error, and put all the heavy lifting in the network, the servers. And we all have heard the term server, the IP servers, the web servers, and all that. That's where the heavy lifting goes on. In the old days, you couldn't do this because in the old days, you didn't have enough bandwidth in the network to be able to have efficient communication. I'll talk about bandwidth in a second. In the network to make that happen, right? When we got enough bandwidth, we're able to take the heavy lifting off the device, put it into the cloud, thus making this less expensive, more efficient, and faster. This client-server architecture is the key to all the features you have today. And then this point here I make, it's important. There are things in the network called routers and gateways and firewalls. They are dumb devices. When I started in the phone company, we had what we call the Advanced Intelligent Network. She smiled when I said I started in the phone company. She's thinking, Thomas Edison days? When I started in the phone company, they had switches, central office switches, and they were really smart. The phone was dumb. Those who are young enough don't remember a little black telephone you have on your desk, right? Real dumb. All it did was dial, and barely that, right? All the intelligence was in the network, right? Well, what we did was we moved the network intelligence out into the peripherals, into these end devices. So now the network is pretty dumb. And that's a great thing because it makes it fast, and it makes it cheap. Dumb is fast and cheap in telecommunications term. Smart is expensive, complicated, and breaks. You want things done. All right. Just quickly then, when you think of packet networks, this is what you need to think about. Think of the highway. The packets are the cars. Does that make sense? Is that an image you can grasp in terms of a packet network? Right? The packets are the cars. And the great thing about packets, notice there's trucks here and there's cars, there could be motorcycles. Doesn't matter what's in the packet. All packets have the same thing. They have a motor, they have a transmission, they have the same thing, but more importantly, they have an origination address and a destination address. And I guarantee you on this chart, what are the chances that every one of these vehicles has a different origination address and a different destination address? Probably 100%. That's the beauty of the packet network, is that all these packets are commingling on the network, and all they know, they're so dumb, all they know is what off-ramp to take. That's all they know. I'm going to this place, I just go to that off-ramp. That's how we make it smart. Now, most of you probably aren't aware of, there's a thing called net neutrality that's going on in the world right now. You're shaking your head yes, so you're familiar with that. There are people that suggest that one of these lanes be dedicated to a certain kind of traffic. Let's say downloading movies. Because what happens when you're commingling all this traffic, you might get some interruptions. How many times you send an email, and one time it takes that much, and the next time you send an email, it might take that much, right? That's because this network allows for delays, right? So if you're getting off the off-ramp here, and there's delays on that off-ramp, you sort of slow down, and you have to go around it. Well, if you're downloading a movie, you might not want delays. Doesn't affect you guys much, but I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of stuff going on in the network about how to make this most efficient. Any questions? Comments? Is this helpful? Is this kind of stuff useful? Sure you have to deal with this. Here's a router. On the back here, all the numbers on the back of this. And you all have to manage that, right? Facilities, you have to manage that. There's IP address. Whoops, let me back up. There's IP addresses. Each of these have what's called a MAC address, which is each one of these devices has a MAC address. That means this device has an address. It also can have an MEID or a wireless address. It can have a phone number that can change or not change. It's not important other than for you guys to understand that there has to be a way to manage all these numbers. And that exists. All right. Quickly then. Mobile communication. First form of communication, cave painting, not very mobile, right? It existed, but it wasn't very mobile. So they said, well, what did I say? People want to connect. People are mobile. So we need to come up with something. Stone tablets was the first mobile communication. Shows you the way I think weird, right? This is mobile. There's no difference between when somebody sends me an email and this. Well, we'll talk about the differences in just a second. Weight and mass. Weight and mass. There's a lot of things. I mean, what? You're not going to carry around, nobody's going to send you a 6 meg document in stone tablets. Right? The amount of information on that stone tablet is pretty limited. All right, so that worked for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Then around the 1st century, we developed parchment and paper. You realize the benefit of that over stone tablets for moving information around? Huge. That's why at that century, around this time, you have all these new documents formed and tremendous documents. The Bible, the Quran, the Torah. All these documents that all of a sudden sprung up. It's like, wow, look what we can do. We can now move information around easily. It was tremendous. And that worked, so you had this time for the 10,000 first century, and then the next big development was steam engine. Right? Now, remember, up until this time, information could only move at the speed of man or speed of a horse. So George Washington, when he sent, was it John Adams was in Europe when George Washington, right? So when he was corresponding with John Adams, how long would a message take from George Washington? Months to go there and back. Now, what are we talking about when this is invented? Days and weeks, right? To take a message from Washington out to the west, or from Washington, D.C. to the West Coast when you have a train, you're now talking a week. Huge benefit in speed. So that was great. Then we did this. The late 1800s. We domesticated the electron. Domestication, just like we domesticated the horse, we domesticated the electron. Now we're able to move information at the speed of light. If you look at what's different today versus any time in history, it's my ability to communicate with mobile at the speed of light. Instantaneous. The bad part about this is many of our business practices are still back into the 19th century. Many of our business practices that we have, like for example, and this is, I was talking to you about this. I have this new thinking. It's like we go to business meetings now and say to people, okay, turn off your phones. Turn off your phones. Because nothing else in the world is happening while we're having this meeting. How many of you are turning off your phones now? Right? Or it's okay, you can multitask with me. I'm okay with that because information is now moving at the speed of light. There might be something happening right this minute that you need to know about. Some pipe might just have burst. Some tenant might just have stolen something. The thing here I liked when he was saying how you have to be careful somebody doesn't walk away with your AV equipment. Right? I mean, what would be if your AV equipment was able to communicate to you and let you know it walked, and right now it walked? Would you want to wait 2-3 hours? All right, so you get the point. Things have changed today. So you now have this information world at the speed of light. We just need to bring the business practices up to it. All right, any questions? That's sort of just fundamental stuff. Okay, now this is more of the technical stuff, the drivers of communication. These are actually 3 different things: bandwidth, throughput, and latency. I put them together because they're essentially, for this purpose, the same. The largest amount of bandwidth is the amount of communication available, is right what we're doing now. Face to face, you can see my motion, you can hear me, there's all these senses, all this bandwidth. You're hearing stuff outside, your other friends. This is the most bandwidth. Everything that goes telecommunications is going to be less and less bandwidth. The telephone is a very narrow bandwidth. I don't know if you know this, but the telephone is like only a 20 cycle, like 10,000 cycles to 40,000 cycles. It doesn't get the lows and the highs of people's voices. It changes communication. Essentially, what I'm talking here is the size of the pipe. So if, going back to my roads analogy, 75 out here might have 6 lanes. That's the bandwidth. The throughput is how much traffic can go in that 6 lanes. And that can vary. The bandwidth doesn't change. The throughput can change based on any number of different factors, right? How much traffic and all those other things. And latency is basically, if I send you something, how long does it take to get an answer back? So in terms of a driver of communication, this is an important aspect of communication, is how big your pipe is. Next one is applications. Is it one-way or two-way? This communication is essentially two-way, though it feels sometimes to me like one-way, right? But you're giving me feedback, right? So it's two-way, right? If I said something to make you blush, I could see you blush, right? That's a response. That's two-way. But a lot of communication is one-way. A thermostat on the wall is a one-way communication to you, right? It's telling you what the temperature is. It's one way. You need to know what the communication is. I often say to people when I'm in a conversation, is this a one-way conversation or two-way conversation? Right? Are you just lecturing me? Right? And don't expect a response. You hear that a lot as a teacher, you know. Yeah. Or is it really a two-way conversation? Are we really having a two-way conversation? Right? You need to know that if you're going to conduct effective communication. Oftentimes, a lot of people think they're in, two people in a conversation think they're both in a one-way conversation. Right? You ever been in those situations where you both think you're in a one-way conversation and you're sort of talking in this regards? Another one is asynchronous and synchronous. Asynchronous means separated in time. We call it in telecommunications store and forward. Email is asynchronous. Text messaging is asynchronous. You send an email, there is no expectation, right, that you will get a message back immediately. There is no expectation. It could be the next minute, could be the next day. We call that asynchronous. You need different bandwidths if it's asynchronous. If it's asynchronous, you don't need as much bandwidth. If it's synchronous, where you're in this harmony, we watched the thing on the Eagles the other day. They had a special on the Eagles. And their whole thing was harmonies, was being in synchronous with each other, on having that synchronicity between them. Now you need more bandwidth if you're going to be synchronous, because now you have this two-way going on. And then finally, I'm going to talk more about it, but security. I never used to put, this is updating the slides, never used to put security in my conversations before. Now security is used. You read the news, right? Didn't everybody get hacked? You know, I think they said everybody's been hacked. I think what I heard yesterday. Everybody's been hacked. So security is huge. So that's another performance measure. First performance measure is bandwidth. How much bandwidth do you need? I think I did a speed test here at the Wi-Fi here. It's not very much bandwidth. What's that? It's not, right? It's slow. It's like it's slow. But if you needed more bandwidth, then you'd have to pay for more bandwidth. Just like if you need more bandwidth on the road, we heard that this morning about the Beltway and all that. You need more. You need to pay for it. All right, storage. Again, this is a new thing that I never would have talked about, the cloud. Where are you going to store all this data? And by the way, all this data is created because it's all digital now. And in digital, you can make copies of things, perfect copies of things in digital, so everybody copies everything. Now, there's real benefits to that, which I'd love to have further discussions in terms of searches and all that other stuff. But just recognize that's another driver of communication. Where is the storage? Is it on the machine or is it in the cloud? If it's in the cloud and you're getting it, you need more access. Moore's law, speed of processors is increasing, doubling every 18 months. Is that right? So anybody's expert in Moore's law? Gordon Moore, he was at Intel. He wrote that in 1970s. It's been true since the 1970s. Processor speeds continue to get faster and faster and faster, which give us our capability. Reliability, that's another measure. Many errors. In the phone company, we usually talk in terms of nines. 5 nines, 6 nines, and that's 99.99999% reliable is a telephone company. The network that you all you use is 99.569% reliable. But you have to decide in your office how much reliability you want. All that being said, my humble opinion, everything comes down to this last bullet. Yes, sir.
Ira, how do you determine what the right combination of bandwidth and processor speed is? I mean, so you don't have too much of one, not enough of the other.
It's a price performance. Like anything else, you have to look at the application to decide what is that balance for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Very good. The question was, how do you know what level of bandwidth you need?
Yeah. So you don't get a real fast
so you don't.
processor, but you're held back by the bandwidth.
Right. The question is how much bandwidth you need. In network design, the chart looks like this. If I have 6 lanes of traffic, most of the time I have more than enough bandwidth. Rush hour, I have very little bandwidth. Network engineers try to get right around here. Does that make sense? You don't want to overbuild, and you don't want to underbuild. So you build it right for the need. The challenge, though, goes to the cost, price, performance. Business has to decide where that is. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess
So
so.
it's just what do you need to do? If for example, if my kids come to me and say they need to download HD movies, I'm going to say no. I don't get enough performance for that price out of my kids. No, you don't get to download movies. You get the right. You get the bandwidth that doesn't require that cost. However, if my boss says in order to do my job I need to download movies, then I'll be willing to pay that price. It all comes down in telecommunications, unlike most other businesses. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Unlike many other businesses, it's purely a cost business. We know what the costs are. We know what it costs to lay a cable. We know what it costs to buy a router. All this stuff is known. You want more bandwidth? It's going to cost you more money. It's a simple analogy. I mean, that's why you hire people like us who have that expertise, who can tell you exactly where on that curve you need to be. I know I went a long time on this question, but was that the answer you were looking for, or do you want a magic answer like it's 7?
That's good.
Yeah, it's not a magic answer. Okay. All right. There are, as I mentioned, mobile is different than wireless. You'll be mobile. There's wired and wireless. There's 3 kinds of cable. Our traditional twisted pair, been around a long time, very inexpensive. I think when I was doing it, a cable drop was like $100 to do a drop. Is that pretty much what it is now? Real inexpensive. Coax, more expensive, a little harder to work with, but it's faster, provides more bandwidth. And then you have fiber. I have an example here if anybody's interested. Do you want to pass this around? Of what a fiber looks like. This was the first one that I was involved with in 1977, of the first fiber. They've gotten it much better now, but that's an example of fiber. Fiber's the fastest, most expensive, hardest to install, but it's the most secure. You can tap either twisted pair or coax easily. Anybody can go out if you wanted to have a non-secure system, then twisted pair and coax. Fiber, you cannot tap. It's impossible. If you know where the ends are, you'll see a signal loss if somebody gets into fiber. So fiber is the most secure, but it is also the more expensive. There is a thing now we're talking about called FTTH. It's called fiber to the home. Fios, anybody have Fios? Know about Fios? Verizon is big on this. Eventually, we will have fiber all the way to your home. Right now, it's still fiber we call FTTC, fiber to the curb. Right? So, UVerse, fiber, AT&T, that's FTTC, fiber to the curb. They bring it to your curb, and then it's usually coax from the curb. All right, wireless, the alphabet soup. The 2 terms you need to know, the first term is wireless LAN. We call it WLAN. Wi-Fi is a wireless LAN. Bluetooth is a wireless LAN. Zigbee is a wireless LAN. This is a wireless LAN, by the way. We use wireless all the time. Oh, I have another one. This, I have a wireless car, key tether, that's wireless. Wireless is everywhere. It's incredible how much wireless we use. Oh, by the way, Zigbee, anybody use Zigbee in their facilities? It's used for power control. Zigbee is actually pretty big in the industry for power control. Then we have WLAN, cellular. As I mentioned, HSPA, that's what AT&T and T-Mobile use. That's how they can say they're 4G, because they've arbitrarily said that's a 4G technology. So, which, technically I think you can say that.
High speed.
Pardon me? It's high speed. That's where they... high speed packet access, I believe. And I was in a meeting once with the Japanese. They made us pay $5 every time somebody asked an acronym that you couldn't explain. We had a big pot. It got pretty big sometimes in terms of, and I should have anticipated that. LTE, long-term evolution. There you go. CDMA, circuit detect multiple access. See, I do know most of them. GSM, global system for mobile. And then WiMAX is Wi-Fi Max. Those are the different WAN technologies. Again, I would love to spend time going over each one and what the differences are. We're going to talk about it. LTE, by the way, is the winner. Just so you know, the world is going LTE on a WAN. So even though you saw the T-Mobile commercials talk about their 4G, they've committed to LTE. AT&T's committed to LTE. Everybody's going LTE. And then there's others. Satellite. We have satellite in our car. I love satellite radio. We tried a few years ago to do satellite on phones. Anybody remember those days? It never worked because of the delay of going 23,000 miles up and 23,000 miles back. Just never was user friendly. So satellite phones never really worked unless you're on an oil rig in the Gulf. Infrared, big infrared is a wireless technology. Many people use infrared building to building because it's inexpensive. Problem with infrared, though, if it's cloudy or rainy, performance is affected. Just want to remind everybody that humans are basically wireless, right? Eyes are wireless. This is light waves, sound waves. We are basically wireless communicators, just by definition. Wireless performance driver. Any app, any device, anywhere. That's the goal. Any device, any app, anywhere. My goal in telecommunications is to make this device work. Make your experience with what remember the goal is to solve problems, right? Remember, don't lose sight of what the goal was. The goal is to get information to solve problems. So you need to be able to get that information from any device, from any location, at any time. That is my goal for you. I'm not going to make your decision. In fact, I have a video that I like to show that I didn't show. The movie 1941, there's a great line in it with Dan Aykroyd where they're talking about Pearl Harbor. And they're saying to him, you expect me to go, they're talking, Dan Aykroyd plays the information guy, and he says, you expect me to launch the ships based on your information? He goes, no, sir, I recognize what I do. He was an analyst. My job is to give you information. Making hard decisions on incomplete information is your job, Mr. Admiral. Right? My job is to give you the information. You guys get paid to make the decisions. But here's the more important thing. What we're seeing now with the technology is we can deliver your desktop experience wherever you are. So I've got my computer back there, and I essentially can have the same experience on my desktop as I can have here using wireless. That is our intent, is to have a desktop experience wherever you are, to have enough bandwidth to make that happen. That's our goal, and with 4G wireless, we are able to make that happen. With Wi-Fi, of course, you can do that. The problem with Wi-Fi, and I'm going to show it here, Wi-Fi is limited in distance. So Wi-Fi works at home or in an office, works fine, but it's limited in distance. You can do it with 4G, but notice what I say there. 4G is more costly. I'm a very expensive person, and it costs a lot to pay my salary. Yes, ma'am?
What about virtual emissions? Are those
Is that like the desktop experience, but through whatever screen you're on or something?
The question is, what about virtual machines? I'm not sure I know the answer to that question because I don't know what a virtual machine is, but I suspect it's that desktop anywhere experience, that the machine can be virtually anywhere. If you're shaking your head, yes. Yes, that is what our goal is to make the transport independent of the application. All right, so as I said, the differences between the WLANs, the wireless local area networks, and the wireless wide area networks. Wireless local area networks are limited to just a few hundred feet. Bluetooth is just a few feet, right? They are, by the way, and I love this, coming up with a Wi-Fi that will go multiple miles. They call it super Wi-Fi, where you can now blanket a city with Wi-Fi, which, of course, companies like the cellular companies are not happy about. I'm going to talk about that in a second as to how that fits in. It's unlicensed spectrum, which is important, I'm going to talk about, and it's not secure. Wi-Fi is the least secure. If you want to do anything secure, don't even think Wi-Fi. Even if you put all the security stuff on it, don't even think Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is not secure. So if you're using your Wi-Fi now to send all your corporate stuff, recognize that that is your risk, right? Then you've got wireless LANs, distance is miles. It's licensed and unlicensed spectrum, but it can be very secure. Cellular is very secure because the way it works is that the packets, remember I showed the packets, they shift lanes randomly, and the packets are encoded, encrypted, so that it's very hard to sniff out. I mean, you watch it on TV, I guess there's some shows where they sniff out cellular stuff. But in reality, cellular is very hard to scope. All right, message to you guys. They're going to always coexist, wireless and wireline. My belief, wireless and wireline will always coexist. Wired is faster, more secure than wireless. And in some respects, it's cheaper. You wire office, you're done. But wireless gives you the mobility. So as I show there, you'll have an office that may have a need for both. This is going to be based on what? Applications. Right? You're surprised that I said that? Everything is going to be based on application. What is the application? All right. I talk here about spectrum. I'm going to pass this around too. We talk in terms of wireless. There's a thing that exists. It's called the radiomagnetic spectrum. We actually deal in a very limited spectrum. And in that spectrum, that very limited spectrum, I'm going to pass this around. This is the licensed and unlicensed spectrum that the FCC regulates. Pass that around. And it shows you how complicated it is in terms of managing. So in there, when you tune your radio, the FM is like 100, 99, 88 to 100. That's on here. You'll see that under FM. And then AM has its bands and cellular has its bands. Managing all that stuff is difficult. If you want to know, remember I said that wireless is more expensive than wired. The reason is managing that spectrum, managing the mobility. Mobility management costs money. If I have to keep track of where you are and find you, that takes money. That is more costly, takes more network resources. It is more difficult to do. Just quickly, you may or may not know this, in the old days when I first started, we had the term car phone actually looked like that, right? And by the way, that only has one channel. Only has one channel. You'd be in your car and you had to wait for the light to go out to be able to pick up the phone. Because if it was busy, now later on they had 7 channels, but if it was busy, you had no choice. You had to wait. You only had one channel for a whole city. What cellular did, and it's brilliant, is it broke that up into small cells, and then it ties the cells together. That's what makes cellular so powerful. And that you want more traffic? Add more cells. Now, zoning people don't like a lot of cell sites. They don't like a lot of towers. This is just 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. This is how the T-Mobile and AT&T can get away with saying they're 4G. As I listed there, they do all these things in terms of digital, packet switching, high speed, This is actually something that you all don't need to know. Just know that there is a migration, a technical migration. We are now, but believe it or not, working on 5G. Notice I say 20 megabytes. 5G is going to be 100 megabytes. Whoa. The question, of course, is when are you going to see 5G? I predict 15 years. And the reason not so much for technology is the carriers are going to want to capture as much profit out of their investment, and it'll take them 15 years to capture that investment. So don't expect 5G for a while. I've listed here HSPA, I got LTE, WiMAX, the different technologies. ATE actually is going to come out, they think, with a little different version, but they're still talking about it. These are some of the speeds that we're talking about. Notice spectrum here. That's on that chart, different spectrum. There is physics involved in which spectrum is most efficient, but not enough to make a difference. So what to pick? You want voice or data? That's an important decision you have to make. If you want data, you can go with different technologies that only focus on data. High speed or low speed. We get a lot of machine to machine. I'm sure you guys deal with this. Meter readers, control systems. Control systems can be data and very low speed. So going back to your question, you can go very low cost if you're low speed and not a lot of mobility and just data. You add voice, that adds to the cost. High speed adds to the cost. You have to pick the carrier. No question about it. Some of that is choice. What I tell people is ask people in your office what carrier gets the best service. Right? That's the best way to tell. If you talk to somebody and they have Sprint and doesn't get coverage in your office, then don't go with Sprint. As I said, LTE is the clear winner. So LTE is the winner. Everybody's going to go LTE. You're smiling. I want to go smile.
Well, I'm just thinking, is Verizon paying you to say that?
That's an interesting statement. The question was, is Verizon paying me to say this? The answer is no. This is my academic, as my professional opinion. I think that this is the future. It's not a paid advertisement from Verizon. Yes, sir.
Will voice eventually be done on the data system?
Yes. The question is, will voice eventually done? Right now, voice and data are two different networks. What we are talking about in terms of voice, we're talking about, we call it VoLTE, voice over LTE. And everything will go voice over data. In fact, we see it already, voice over IP. Anybody have Vonage or, right. I mean, it works great. How many people have Cisco IP phone systems in their office? Works great, right? Yeah, it makes more sense. The idea of voice is everything's going to be over IP because IP is just more efficient.
So what will happen to people that have just voice phones?
Repeat the question.
The question is, what will happen to people who just have voice phones? We have in this country, we're seeing it a lot, it's called a digital divide. That digital divide will continue to widen between people who can adopt the new technologies and people who cannot. We already see it when you hire somebody who doesn't know experience with Microsoft Word or any of the applications, right? We're already starting to see, we already see a digital divide in this country. In every country, is so that people who are on the old technology, they will eventually be phased out. Not to use the Soylent Green term, but eventually they're going to fall so far behind, and nobody's going to support them anymore. So everybody's going to LTE. Wireless applications, I'm going to go through this quickly. Android and iOS have 92% of the market. I have a Win 8 phone here, Win 8 mobile phone. I really like it. I think Win 8 is going to be a winner for Microsoft. I don't know about tablets, but on phones it works great, and I think it will be a success. So they'll eat into that. RIM, that's BlackBerry. They're struggling, and chances are they won't ever come back. Some of the mobile applications, I'd love to talk about this if I had more time. Yeah. Navigation, we love navigation. Location services, remote control, remote monitoring. Those are the applications that you need to pay attention to. Decision criteria, as I said before, is price. Everything is about price. Price per bit is going to continue to come down, but as price per bit comes down, we find more bits to put on the network. So price is going to be pretty much stable over time. We pay now an average is $50 a month for a cellular phone. That's pretty much the way it's going to be. So figure the average cost per device will stay about the same. But you're going to do more, pardon me? That's expensive, you say?
No, I was saying that was cheap.
That's very inexpensive. When I started, it was $400 or $500 for, and some of you may remember cell phones are $400 or $500 a year. Security, as I said, this is a huge issue you have to be very careful with, especially for wireless. And as I say here, there's a lot of stuff. I teach at Keller, and I'd say 60% of my students at Keller want to get into security, IT security, because that is the new field, hot field to get into. Features, a blank slate. The notion here is that you're going to buy devices that are blank slates. They're going to be just connection devices, and then you'll load on the stuff you need, which is going to make your job easier as facilities managers, because then when you need to buy a device, you don't have to buy all this other stuff that comes with it. You'll buy a blank slate. I want 50 blank slates, and then you put on the stuff you need and give that to your employees, and then that's what they have. Thank you very much. They're not playing Angry Birds.
So you program your own.
You program your own, exactly. We call it a blank slate. We're seeing more and more of that. And it's a way to reduce the cost. People who are fighting us are all the applications people who want to load all their applications on in order to raise the cost. As I said, because of processor speed, things are going to get faster. And that's, as I said, the speed here, the ramp up, 4G, and then I'm talking 5G. This is my eye chart that all technology people have to put in. This is like, again, if we talk, if we go into a real detailed, this is the kind of thing where you need to know where you are. If you're GSM on AT&T, what's your migration path as you go forward? We've mapped all that out so that we can help you design a migration path going forward. Smart grid, we've all heard of the smart grid. Essentially, the smart grid takes all this intelligence that's in the endpoints. Remember I mentioned the devices. See how this all comes back. All these devices have endpoints, and we tie them all together. So, on that note, let me show you a commercial I just saw the other day, and I thought it was great.
You know what's impressive? A talking car. But I'll tell you what impresses me. A talking train. This GE locomotive can tell you exactly where it is, what it's carrying, while using less fuel. Delivering whatever the world needs, when it needs it. After all, what's the point of talking if you don't have something important to say?
What's the point in talking if you have nothing to say? God, that should be written on my epitaph. I just think that's great. Whatever ad guy came up with that was perfect, right? What's the point of talking? You have nothing to say. You manage buildings that have a lot to say. The challenge you have is getting it, listening to it, right? So that's what we got. Smart building. I'm going to answer your question. Okay. Smart buildings, smart grids, smart trains. They're all nice, right? But it's the connection to people that makes the difference. You can't lose sight. You can't get so hung up in the bandwidth or the cool device. You really have to focus on what is it doing for me? What's actionable for me? How does this information help me make the next decision? That's what the focus needs to be. Critical thinking is the critical skill we need to be teaching people, not this stuff. There are people like me that can bring this stuff. We need to be teaching critical thinking. What are you going to do with all this information? We had a situation the other day. I want to ask you a question. Where I got my wife an iPhone. She had a BlackBerry. So now she's gotten into the situation, and you all know these people who go at dinner. You make a statement. Oh, I'm going to look that up right now, right? They're always looking stuff up on the internet, right? They got their iPhone. They can do that. But you realize how powerful that is because now you get information that's useful to you. All right. So the question was, who's going to own all this network, right? Going forward, the grid. Who's going to own the grid? Which goes back. Oh, the grid is now elements, and everybody's going to. Well, there's going to be various elements, and because they all interconnect, many different people own many different parts. There's not going to be the AT&T model where AT&T owns everything. No. So power companies may own this piece. You may own the building piece. The ACA, the air conditioning guy may own the air conditioning piece. The phone company, you can manipulate them. That's not the right word. Leverage them.
Integrate.
But I was thinking more use them against each other to get better, faster, cheaper, right? Because there'll be more people to do, like you do with AT&T and Verizon. There are multiple people. Leverage. That's the word I was saying. You can leverage them. So I think it's not going to be one person. The beauty of the internet is that it's like the highway system. The packets all are interchangeable. The roads are all interchangeable. So I think everybody, in fact, for any young people or people like me who are starting new businesses, that might be an opportunity to own a portion of it. Did that answer your question? Sort of? Sort of? Yeah. I'm rushing, so what answer would you have liked? 7. No, I'm serious. What answer would you have liked?
I don't know. That's why I asked the question.
No, would you think it would work better if one person owned everything?
I
Or?
thought the government was going to control.
No, this is that's one thing we're seeing in telecommunications, as we see with the spectrum. Other than allocating the bandwidth, the government is getting out of telecommunications, and that is a good thing. They're controlled. Pardon me?
It might be more vulnerable if one person owns it.
That's correct. So you can go and pick whichever, like XO and those kind of things. All right, just quickly, I got to do this for your summary questions. So, which is the most secure? LTE. Very good. There's point 1 on your continuing education. Which of the 2 operating systems have the majority of the market? Android and iOS. Apple and Android. And that's very good. So that was the last one. Oh, what's the most likely next wireless technology? LTE. See, now you all get points now for your continuing education. So, any more questions? We have 5 more, a few more minutes. Any more questions? I can go into more detail with that if you're interested. And by the way, I don't have any better answer than you might have on this. GE owns Element, and I think that's the thing. The smart grid is not a thing, like the AT&T. The smart grid is a.
It's the equivalent to the internet.
It's equivalent to the internet. That's why I brought it up. It's a bunch of elements that are plugged together. Does that make sense?
But I work for GE, and they have kind of coined that term for all of the marketing stuff. So you tend to think of them as
Oh, so you like that commercial I showed then, right? But right, and a lot of the power companies, the idea of a smart grid is that the idea of a smart anything is that it is self-healing and it can troubleshoot itself, so that a smart something is able to say, oh, okay, if A, then B. See, does that make sense in terms of what we in the technology define what smart is? It's a program. It's an algorithm. If A, then B. If A, then B makes you smart. If just asking that question, what is dumb? If A, always B is dumb. Smart is if A, then B, or if A, then B or C. That's what makes things smart. And that's why I brought up things about the processors and storage. Right? Because as processors get faster, as storage gets more, they're able to get smarter because they're able to build more algorithms, to ask more questions, to look at more information. So that's why we're getting smarter. That's why you need the transport. Yes, sir?
You didn't cover this, but I've had a lot of IT problems with fiber.
Okay.
Which one is better, single mode or multi-mode, or does it depend on the application?
I don't know the answer to that question. It sounds like multi-mode would be better. It's like that commercial is doing 2 things at once better than one thing at once. Yeah, somebody should Google it. I don't know the answer because I don't deal with fiber. I would imagine that multi-mode, because just conceptually you're doing multiple things, but single mode could be better because you're doing one thing faster. So, yes, sir.
Your comments about LTE in the future.
Yes.
Is that U.S. based or
worldwide? Worldwide, and the reason for that.
In the past, that's not that we had.
Correct, because we had GSM and everything. The question was, I said that LTE would be dominant, and the question was, is that U.S. based or worldwide? There was a thing called Betamax and VHS a number of years ago. VHS won because a number of distributors signed on to that. We now had a thing with HD DVDs and Blu-ray. Blu-ray won because Sony signed on to it. When one big distributor sort of picks it, the way a dominant design works in the industry is that sort of as a tipping point. So in the case of Verizon going with LTE, and then Vodafone, which is Verizon's partner, going with LTE, which is the international, game over. Then it was just a matter that the industry said, fine, you win. It's the same thing as the Blu-ray HDV versus Blu-ray versus HD concept. That answer your question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the interesting one was that Sony originally wanted beta.
Yes.
How many people here bought beta because you got Sony?
But what JVC did is they locked up the distribution, and Sony didn't have distribution at that time, so they would.
I have a really good beta that I sell.
Well, beta's still used in professional. You photographer guys, beta's still the professional technology. It is a better technology. It's another example. It's another example of in the marketplace, the best technology doesn't always win. Right? You have to be very careful not looking for the best technology. Going back to your question, you have to look at the technology that solves your problem. Don't look for the best. You know, thank God my wife did that when she was picking me as a husband. Right? That you have to look at it what's best for you.